And like we mentioned earlier, kindly put your mobile phones on silent mode. And the stage is all yours.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. How are we doing today? Our last session was pretty interesting, so I'm sure, apart from the delicious sleep-inducing food, we are feeling quite energized. Great. So before we start our panel discussion, let's see by a show of hands, how many of you feel that the current learning programs you're either producing or consuming could benefit from a little bit more interactivity and engagement? Okay, that's great. I think our conversation is going to be super relevant. Great. So as you heard, the panel discussion that we have today is on the experience economy, how to make learning engagement. And today we have experts Shruti, Loly, and Satish with us. We are going to be discussing and delving into the art of storytelling, the power of gamification, and the importance of creating human emotional connections through learning. We'll also learn why and how designing those learning experiences are not just consumed, but actively lived and shared. And we'll also discover innovative strategies to create memorable learning journeys that leave a lasting impact. As Nick mentioned in the beginning of the keynote, as you must have heard, how can we create lasting experiences? How can we guide performance through our learning sessions? So let's start with our first question without further ado. And I would love to know a little bit about the personal experience of all of you three. What is that most memorable learning experience you've ever had? Why does it stand out for you? Would you like to share? Start with Shruti.
Sure, I can start with that. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And I think Cheshta said it all in terms of your mood after lunch. I hope you're all excited to hear us and make this learning session also as engaging as we are talking about it. So my, I think, special experience, Cheshta, goes back, and I would assume it would be special for most of us who've been graduate engineer trainees or management trainees. The onboarding program that I underwent when I joined, an organization. And why was it special was because it was not a training program or a PPT-driven learning experience. It was where we were onboarded. It was a 6-month journey, and it was learning by doing. So we were actually, as management trainees, put in different departments across 6 months. And although I was an HR management trainee, I was doing ops. It was a call center. I was with MIS, also working out, the sales incentives of our sales agents. I was with quality, looking at the impact of what call quality can have on business. Within HR, even if I was in OD, I was doing talent acquisition to understand, how that runs, onboarding. So, the opportunity cost of maybe delaying hiring from 45 days to 60 days, what's really the impact for the business? All of that. So I think that's one of the most memorable experience that stays with me because I really understood the fundamentals of how the business P&L runs by that experience. Yeah, so that's one.
That's great, and I think you got this at the start of your
start of my
journey.
Journey, absolutely.
Lovely,
so
learning
special.
by doing.
Yeah,
Great.
Thank you.
Loly?
Yeah, so I'll probably take the experience back to, in fact, I happened to share this with Shruti and Suresh while we were waiting in the lounge. For me, my earliest and the most memorable learning experience goes back to my school days, where I actually started loving the subject of Hindi purely because of the teacher. And I think what I learned from her is that when you are teaching something, yeah, I'm sure we all can relate to our school or college time where we've had some teacher or some professor who is not just so passionate about what they are teaching, but they teach it in a way that the student has understood it beautifully. And for me, I think, and as I say this, I can actually visualize her when she was doing the class. For example, a simple thing like, proverbs, right? The muhavre in Hindi. She would not just explain what it meant, but she would make sure that, you understood it in the essence of, you'll remember it till the rest of your life. And I think that for me was a huge experience and a huge learning experience because later on, and I think I tried to in some way emulate a lot of what she does in, whenever we are designing any of our learning and development programs at the workplace also. So that comes, that definitely is a very, very critical factor for me to see that, okay, this is how she did it, and she did it so well that, I can still talk about her after maybe 3 decades. So I think, that's the impact that I can speak of.
That's wonderful. I think I'm already in nostalgia, seeing and hearing all the school and college experiences. And I believe, again, I would love to mention, because that was my key learning as well. As Nick mentioned in the beginning, there's education and then there's learning. And education is fact-based, topic-focused. Learning happens every day. And I think we are seeing some of those experiences as well. Satish.
So good afternoon, everybody. And first thing first, very happy to see the reverse diversity on the stage. Yeah. I've been part of a lot of panel outside India also during my experience, and I will find the organizers trying to fill that space, having one, female gender. So very, very happy on that. I'll share two, in fact, and one could be very common for everybody present. If I ask a question, who's the king of the jungle? Everybody has one answer. And being a learning organization, we work with so many companies, as Manipal UNext. The reason that answer is same because of the repetition that has occurred over years. So you ask your mom who's the king of the jungle, she'll say lion. You go to the TV, the animation movie, the book, the teacher, the school, everything. So that's the most basic I can talk about. As a learner, as a professional, if I talk and experience, I think that's also a problem in most instances we all come across. How do we keep focus? This is another word apart from AI that's been spoken a lot lately. How do you reduce distraction? How do you keep focus? So this is one experience where we were attending I was part as a learner group. We were attending the innovation workshop, and we were supposed to come out resolving some of the complex problems we were looking at as part of that workshop. 3 days outdoor residential program. Day one, ice-breaking activities among the leadership team and all that stuff. We had an instruction that 9 o'clock you meet at the breakfast, but you will not carry any gadget which has time. So neither the watch, nor the mobile, nor the laptop, nothing. You just see the time in your room before you leave the room to come for the breakfast, and make sure the sense of time is gone away from you. There was no sense of time in the room. There was no laptop to, put a presentation, because it was more of a workshop style engagement. And then there was no wall clock in the dining room. You'll be surprised we finished day one at 2:30 in the night, and we got to know the time when we were back in the room. We took lunch about 5 o'clock, which were told to us that you took lunch at 5. So I think if you take away the distractions, if you bring in the repetitions, the large challenge of engagement could be resolved. And these are two of the instances, very happy sharing here. Yeah.
Very, very wonderfully summarized. Can we close the conversation? Just kidding. I also wanted to let everyone know, all of you know, that as we're going to dive deeper into the challenges, opportunities, best practices in how to make learning engaging, please keep your questions also ready. In the middle of it, we'll get an opportunity to ask you, and any questions that you have that you want to ask our experts at the stage as well. All right, so now that we've reflected on the most memorable learning experience, where do you think learning programs often fall short, according to all of you? What is that one critical mistake that you've observed in designing learning interventions specifically that prevents them from being equally engaging and impactful? Can we start?
Sure. Okay, so I'll probably go back in terms of making a few assumptions when we say that learning, why does it fail, if at all? Yeah, firstly, is learning the solution to that problem? Yeah, that is one question that we often fail to ask business when they come to us for a learning solution. A lot of times, business comes to me and they say that, we want to do a training for 100 or 200, if not more, people on field for customer centricity. And I often tell them that if it is a problem with 10 out of your 200 people, then it is a skill issue. But if it's a problem with 200 people out there, it's a system issue. And it's not to do with learning that can fix your problem. So the assumption there is, if learning is not the solution to that problem, don't get into it. because then you will be questioned later, why didn't it help? And why are my people still not customer-centric? Because that was not the solution to that alone. There are a lot more things you could do systemically to really get customer-centric, yeah? So that's first thing. Second, I think these are two assumptions. The second is the right people in the room. The learning can fail if you've not identified the right people who need it. Yeah, so leadership, mass rollout, and a lot of organizations do that, which is like a leadership competency framework coming in or some guidance around our values, and top to down, everybody is going through that. Yeah, there's no change, there's no contextualization, there's nothing which differentiates a top leader from somebody who's frontline. Their challenges are different. So are we contextualizing to the user group? So I think the two assumptions made, sometimes it's also an issue with the design. And that is rare because we are probably having the right people in L&D, and they're working with the best partners who can build or co-create the best program for you. But really, sometimes we pack too much. I think Naushad and someone was talking earlier as well in terms of journeys, right? We all love that. And we pack so much. I've attended leadership development programs, 3 days, 10 topics. You're talking emotional intelligence in 2 hours. How can you talk about emotional intelligence in 2 hours and think that participants have understood and do what about it? So really, less is more sometimes, and really focusing on what is the outcome that you want, defining the outcome really well, and then designing your program, getting the right people in the room, the duration, the span, so many things which I think most of us understand from designing perspective. But really, is learning the solution the first thing? And second, what is the outcome you want to drive? If you get that right, there's very rare chances that you will fail in your designs. So that's what I have to say.
That's so true and nicely put. So don't overwhelm, make it engaging, basically. And obviously, context is everything, and with that comes personalization. Loly, what are your
Yeah, so just to add to what Shruti just said, I think most training programs, okay, the learning programs, I always believe, if the people, the audience are there because they want to be there, right? The adage which says you can take a horse to the water, but you can't make him drink. If people are there of their own will and they see that this is going to make a difference to me, 9 out of 10 times, in a way, you have, achieved the outcome. But if somebody is sitting there just because their leader has nominated them and they have to go and check those boxes of X number of hours of training attended, it is going to be not the outcome that one wants to see. So I think the first thing is, of course, in terms of making sure that the people are there because they can benefit. B, there is not too much of, in the context of technology, many a times we tend to overwhelm people with technology and miss the underlying importance of, so technology can be just one of the aspects, right? So when people are attending a training program where they're really going to see that this is going to be a value addition for me, right? Secondly, another thing I've noticed is that many a times, I think, and speaking of how training programs can be really successful is if the audience is able to connect with the facilitator. Many a times we think, okay, we'll get an ex-facilitator from, a very, let's say, a renowned facilitator. But if the audience, for some reason, has not been able to connect, or that person is not able to contextualize the challenges which the audience is facing, then again, the essence of it is lost. So I think multiple things which play a role. And at the end of the day, I think the more we are able to put, the kind of engagement that is really required of a training program, the individual, the facilitator, everyone needs to play an equal role. So many a times, if the minute it becomes that, okay, X number of hours have to be clocked in and it is done, if the learning and development department also looks at it, okay, it's those many hours, I think we've lost the plot there. So everyone has an equal stake to play in that and make it a success.
Right. And I think in the last panel discussion, they also mentioned designing along with facilitation, as you rightly mentioned. Satish, what are your thoughts here?
I think they're pretty well put. These are some of the reasons which you'll find in most cases. In the previous conversation, Naushad also was mentioning pretty much the same. That could be another reason because of failure, which is the last-minute changes in the expectations. So apart from aligning with the learners group, having the right learner group in the room, putting up the right set of pedagogy. For example, I see from our experience working with different industries as a service provider, whenever we talk, let's say IT, which is digital and tech academy that we operate, we will largely have the business user in the conversation. But the moment you go off IT, whether it's the different functional needs or other business needs, at times the involvement, and we understand the challenges with the L&D leaders and the talent development teams are there. Sometimes that also kind of eliminates bringing in that personalization or putting up the right set of content. So I think Shruti and Loly have quite covered it pretty well. I'll only add that if the learner's personas can also be looked at, that is one of the mistake, if you're not looked at the learner persona correctly, can lead to a challenging outcome from a particular workshop or a program. So these are some of the areas.
Right. And I think you've highlighted a great point around identifying learning personas in order to personalize even better. And that builds a great segue to, to our next question, where we move from challenges to solutions. So any specific examples or real life, success stories where you want to share how some of the challenges that you've just highlighted can be addressed through a more immersive and engaging learning programs, and what has been working in your organizations, or maybe you've heard in your peer organizations?
Okay, so I'll probably share one example that comes to my mind, a very recent one, and another one if you give me time for that. So one is about an early managers program that we recently created in Siemens. So there are multiple things you can talk about in leadership. So much that it can be overwhelming. But we're talking about early managers. We're talking about first-time managers who are just stepping into a leadership role. What would they need? So what we really went back to was our employee experience surveys, right? Where are the touch points where we actually measure, and we also have some metrics which talk about how are we creating employee experience from the time they join, even before they join. So we actually have a section on before the person joins you, when the person joins you, having growth talks, which is our internal conversation, continuous conversation methodology to develop people, talking about performance reviews, talking about growth moments, talking about internal mobility, when they leave, leadership, so many things. Yeah, so moments that matter is what we call it. And we identify that this is the group of people we want to train, very clear, early managers, first-time managers. These are the moments we want to bring awareness and some sort of development areas that we identified. And this is something which we can measure at the end of it, that are they really now equipped to create the employee experience that we want to enable in the organization. And that's how we built it. Now, talking of participant personas, how did we map that? We really looked at what kind of learning intervention should we design for them. We wanted a journey for sure, because leadership cannot be done in 2 days. So we started with the online format. We gave them actually data when you log into our LXP for this program. It's called Ready. It talks about data from such engagement surveys, exit interviews, in terms of saying that 40% people moved out because they were not given that. 40 is a high number, maybe 10% is more reasonable, because they were probably not given the internal mobility opportunity, yeah? Or 7 out of 10 people who left us who had some, concern or feedback around a moment there. So when they see the number, people who are driven by numbers get, it sticks there. Then we move to employee testimonials. So we've actually interviewed first-time managers in the organization and their experience. And employees talking of what were their wow moments of having a good leader, and also not so wow moments. That I was not allowed an internal mobility opportunity. That was a disaster for me. It impacted my career. Somebody speaks of, a growth conversation going haywire and not helping me. So really reflecting, you're looking at people like you. You're not looking at someone who's like a Simon Sinek or a leadership guru. You're talking of people around me who talk of leadership challenges and how did they kind of contain that. Then we move to the learning piece. Then we have reflection, where they come together as cohort. Then we take them to a classroom after 3 months and say that this has been the learning, now come together and share. So this is one example how we created our first-time managers program. And maybe if time allows, I'll come back to the second
Yes,
example.
yes, for sure. And hopefully we'll have time, but I would like to really thank you for bringing that example, because I feel that talent segment, first-time managers, mid-level managers, that's really the untapped talent segment for whom we are probably not creating enough engaging learning programs. And this depends on how their role is actually emerging and evolving with the advent of AI, with the removal of all the repetitive tasks. Their role has evolved a lot. They have to meet leaders' expectations, employee expectations, and with that in mind, that's a really important talent segment that you need to retain as well, and identify the learning opportunities. So thank you. Loly?
Yeah, so I think one of the things which we did really well in my current organization is, I remember about 9 years back, we launched this leadership development program, branded it as, calling it as Ignite. The first module that we started was for the first-time managers, okay, because we were finding that as a key area, right, just like Shruti highlighted. And to build that hype around it, we made sure that this entire module, okay, this entire program of about 6 modules was conducted all by the leadership team. So we handpicked leaders who could do these modules. And the first batch that we did about 9 years back, we knew that that would be the stepping stone for all the future. I think we're now in the 9th year and still running, still going strong. Not just that, we have got this so aspirational that there are people who join in and, it's on the floor that, wow, when will we get nominated for Ignite? So it's almost become aspirational. Seeing the success of Ignite, what we now call as 1.0, we launched for the mid to slightly senior level managers called as Ignite 2.0. That again was a roaring success because we came up with modules which they can relate to. Now, because this is conducted largely by leaders within the organization, so the whole context is there. Every single anecdote, every single analogy, everything is contextualized to what they want. And most importantly for them, they see that the leaders are investing so much time in them. So whether it is getting them aligned to the culture, to aligning to our values. In fact, coming to values, during the induction or during the onboarding time, we all understand that we all talk about values, and then we expect people to remember it, and then it's, it may or may not remain. So what we started doing with the values part of it, to how do we imbibe it into the culture, and every single person needs to start breathing and living those values. So the first time about 6 years back, we launched this thing of calling it as the whole organization was divided into 6 teams, and each team was given a value. Now they could come back depicting it in the form of a skit, whatever that they thought is the most innovative, and each one was given a 20-minute slot. Now this again was so beautifully received that people said that, okay, these are things which we create as memories for a very long time. And last but not the least, I'll just share one more example, is on the financial well-being part, right? We realize that today, the average age in our organization is about 27, 28. The reality is, irrespective of the age group, most people today struggle with how they're really managing their finances. We tried getting an external financial advisor, so it all became very bookish, theoretical in this. Then about 10 months back, less than a year back, I would say, we introduced this whole concept of where, again, leaders will chip in and say, these are the mistakes we made, or, like things which we knew these things when we were in our 20s, we wouldn't make these mistakes. Now that became those kind of master classes, and we titled it as Let's Talk Money. We've got some phenomenal responses because here they're able to see that the leaders are being at their vulnerable best, right? Leaders are saying, I made this mistake. I wish I knew this 20 years back. I would probably be in a much better place financially, right? So I think those things have really gone a long way. So I think what I'm trying to essentially say is that wherever the people are able to connect with the facilitator, whatever that the facilitator is speaking of resonates with them, I think those are the ones where there's obviously been maximum impact.
I love it. And I think that is also a really great example of creating emotional connection in creating a transformative learning impact through the sessions. Satish, would you have any
No, I'll
examples?
keep it short looking at the time there. I think only thing is how do you kind of adjust the pedagogy in addition to that when you look at the solution. So for example, uh, there are so many elements today and pretty much all companies use it. You can make it blended, you can use technology, you can use gamification, you can bring in storytelling, you can have assessments, but it has to be adjusted again basis which cohort you're working upon. Sometimes overdoing either of them could just take away the whole objective of the content. You know, the focus shift from content to the engagement. I remember this one training that we were doing on compliance and policies internally for our company, and the facilitator too early in the conversation brought in a gamification. And the audience whole mind shifted towards we want to win by the end, you know. So then learning the whole purpose of learning compliances and policies to adhere to them, you know. So that's one thing. So how can you utilize these various elements? And I think lately the self-learning have been a bit overspoken. It depends who's the learner, you know. So kinesthetic, visual, whatever you call it, we all know it. Because even the research we have done with you, 82% of the L&D leaders, and when I say 82%, it's about 120 of the L&D leaders out of 150, happens to mention that we don't find any outcome out of, I'll not name, but most of the publicly available self-learning programs. So, so this is where it's good to look at the elements of pedagogy to be integrating for the right outcomes as a solution.
Right. Absolutely, the right outcomes and really striving to balance the knowledge and interactive learning experience. I'm going to pause here and ask for any questions from the audience. Any challenges that our experts have highlighted various challenges and talked about different best practices, success stories as well. But anything different that you've been observing in your organization and you want to discuss with them? Yes. We can start with you. Yes. Yes. Is there a, 1 second, is there a mic that we can give?
Online trainings. So I was just saying that the trainings over the years have evolved. We've done offline trainings, we've done classroom trainings, then we moved on to online trainings and things like that. And today in the world of reels, where people's span is very less, how to control the attention span of people in the trainings, how to engage them more actively into the trainings, Some modules are very important, like compliance and all, but so I'm not going into the individual modules, but I'm just saying some of the trainings which are supposed to be, a more theoretical, how do you, help to get them more engaging?
I could give one example because you brought up compliance there and something which then resonates with me. Let's talk about cybersecurity trainings. How many of you have these trainings in your organizations? Mandatory, right? Yeah. So what we've done is we've created this as a cyber police web series, like you have Money Heist. So there's like, it starts with police catching a hacker, and then it goes back in time in terms of how did he or she crack it. What did he or she do? So that's an interrogation room, and it goes in flashback to really ask from the hacker that, how did you get this information? And it's all so well animated. It is one workshop which we were struggling with to get everybody on board, and today it is the most watched web series or web-based learning in our program. So there's no end to creativity there, but don't confuse learning with entertainment. So a lot of times we will say, what next? I have done this program, let's do Lego this time, let's do storytelling, and let's do gamification. So it's not entertainment, but yes, if it can get so entertaining with cyber security, I'm sure you can think of different ways to bring in compliance also as some sort of DNA in your organization. But yeah, this is what we've done, and it's beautiful. And it's like 30-minute, 10, 15-minute series, and some of them go up to 30 minutes, but people don't stop until the episode is over.
Did you experience any binge watching there?
Like, I think I
Thank you.
watched it, like, whatever, when I joined, there were 4-5 of them already rolled out, and I watched them in one go because it was so exciting. And
Awesome.
simple things, where did you lose your phone? How was the phone hacked? Was it not password protected? Or I was sitting in the lawn or the garden and someone may have been there, or I was in the metro and somebody probably overread what I was talking about, my stock and purchase and decisions in the P&L. So many things, but what are those vulnerabilities? Very simply just exposed by way of a video or a web series. So that's what we've done for cyber security.
Thank you.
I think you've made each one of us quite intrigued with this course. I can't imagine I would say, I want to do this course.
It is really nice.
Yes, 1 second. Yes. let's-
Yeah, hi. First of all, very good afternoon, Shruti. My name is Vicky, and I have 2 questions for you. Good afternoon to both of you as well. Shruti, so you mentioned in the early stage of your career, you had the exposure of each department in a call center, and you got exposed to the P&L as well,
Yeah.
to understand the whole process of
Yeah.
the system. Now, Shruti, in an organization where you don't have much time, and sometimes the business heads and the operations give you a very limited time, how do you make your content very engaging in a very short span of time where you have to develop, design, deliver, and evaluate?
Yeah.
That's question number 1. Question number 2,
Can we only have one question
Sure.
in the paucity of
Sorry.
time, and you
Answer
can
that
meet
and
her
also-
later?
Yeah, my
Sure.
attention
And
span
after-
also is.
yeah,
all right.
you will get a
So
chance as
I
well.
will, yeah, so I'll stick to one and let's see if she's generous enough for the second one. So in terms of, your learning and engagement being there, and, how do I equate that to people not having the time to do that? Firstly, as learners, learning head or learning experts, I think we wear multiple hats. I'm a consultant to the business. I'm also a salesperson. Sometimes when I see that there are no good workshops happening, I'm actually literally sitting with the sales leaders and saying, we should do this for your people. Yeah, we should do this for your leadership. Yeah, whatever. So we are doing sales there. I'm doing selling. But a lot of time I'm doing negotiations as well. And I'm saying, I buy time. And I say, I'm not doing it because you want it in 2 weeks. It can't happen. If you want outcome, if you want decision, sometimes you have to hold your ground, be assertive about it, because this is really a high impact intervention. So that is why I think the earlier question that you asked, sometimes learning is never the solution as well, which also I'm very okay to challenge the business and say that, like customer centricity,
Right.
I can't solve your problem. You need to give me access to many more systems or leaders who will work with me. Let's do a design thinking lab and figure out what all needs to be fixed, and let's do a OD intervention. Yeah. So you need to be assertive and fight back and say, I cannot turn around and a solution for you in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. If you have that culture, if you don't, I think then you need to find a place that has a culture and space where you can speak up. Yeah.
And maybe quickly, 2 pointers. You can start small. So look at bite-size learnings as an element if you want to, and see where in the culture that element can fit in. So it doesn't look a punishment, it looks like an encouragement to people.
Correct.
But that's the least you can, bring in if at all there are challenges of time or people availability.
Right. May I ask another question?
We have 2 more people, and we have
Sure.
another question as well.
Thank
But
you so
thank you
much.
so much. You
Thank
can
you.
meet them outside.
Sure. Thanks.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Hi, I'm. Sorry?
Quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. So I'm Nami, and I currently work in a search firm, but my very recent role at one of the places recently, it was a learning problem, and more than a question, actually, I wanted to get views on a perspective. At the start of the panel, we had someone say that business usually doesn't own up, and you partner with business on their learning needs, right? So do you think it's a good or best practice to share when you take business along? Because recently when we were trying to launch a sales academy where we had all facets of HR from TA to learning, and learning was a very important one, designing content and then delivering. And so you take business along. Do you think it's a good practice to imbibe for organizations where it'll have its own pros and cons, right? Having bottlenecks when they don't get time, but having them on the project team so they co-partner with you. Also, their expectation of HR and delivery sometimes gets lost in translation, right? So do you think it's a good practice? Does any of your organization follow it? Just wanted to get some perspective on that.
I think you always have to take business along because everything else exists because business exists. So the point of business being, I would say that for every activity, so whether it's a L&D, whether it's an OD initiative, no matter what it is, if it's not in sync with business and the L&D heads and all of them are not attached at the hip, it will never be a success. You need to have them as your strongest allies, as people who will say, you know what, we're seeing a huge difference in it. Let's have more of it, right? So I think, yeah, it's you can't do it without them.
Involve them early on to ensure their buy-in.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Cheshta, I'll steal
Yes.
20 seconds. So, in fact, see, Sales Academy is a revenue function, so is a given business has to be a part of it. Also, you can challenge what's the outcome they're looking at. So, we, in fact, run one of our academies, Sales Academy. We work with a lot of farmers, retails, FMCG, where attrition is a big problem. You know, attrition goes as high as 50% in some of the organization in early roles. And there, unless the CEO, even of the biggest firms, is not part of that decision-making conversation, the result doesn't come out, you know. It'll be just half-boiled exercise. So answer is yes, just like Loly mentioned, and you have to understand what problem you're solving. Are we solving the productivity problem? Are we solving the retention problem? What is that problem you're trying to solve? Or is it just the knowledge, domain, sales knowledge, or domain knowledge, and accordingly craft the journey?
I'll just give one. I know we're running short of time. Just to prove that point, so when I was talking about that leadership development program of Ignite, right, our biggest business problem was we're not getting enough of people. Even from the market to get ready resources was a challenge. This program turned out to be such a hit that today, 75% of our mid-level guys are all homegrown. So today, business is willing to eat out of the hands of the L&D team because they've seen the success and they say, okay, if you guys are saying it, I'm sure it will be. So it's just about getting that first one or two things right, and then you'll have them, you know.
That's a huge impact story. And I know you had that question. Can we do that post the session? You can speak to them. But I think we are already running late. I'm so sorry. I apologize. I think in the interest of time, just one last question, my favorite question, that one advice you want to give to leaders here on designing learning experiences, absolutely non-negotiable that they should surely invest in. We'll start with you.
I think stick to the basics. What problem are you solving and why you're doing it? So I think never lose track of what problem are you solving. That's my advice.
Thank you.
I think defining the outcome right, and most importantly, if it is, in most cases, I think a facilitator plays a key role in deciding the effectiveness of the training. So you've chosen the right facilitator who has a passion for it. I think that's very key, because that person can make all the difference.
Right, I agree.
Yeah, see, one advice, I think, for the early organizations, I'm saying in terms of L&D journey, it might be 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people or 5,000 people company. What Shruti said is very appropriate, like stick to the basics. But let's say you're already quite ahead in the journey, basis what organization you all are from. What we're saying, because we're working with different kind of organization, different size of organization in different parts of the world, that a lot of intensity in L&D in talent management is moving from job profile to skill profile. So for the organizations who have achieved a certain level of maturity, see how you can look at the skill profile. And that's where the challenges of what roles will be coming in the next 3 years, 5 years, 2 years, will be a little less. Because if you have skill profiles and not just job profiles, if you have skill analytics of people, a lot of these transitions to future roles, new skills, new learnings will be much easier, because then the whole exercise is driven by skill and not either ad hoc or only job basis. Other things, so for example, decision making could be a competency. But to be a good decision maker, you need to understand today how to interpret data. You need to understand, have the ability of, let's say, a bit of critical thinking, so on and so forth. So the multiple skills might be needed to be a good decision maker. So that exercise can also add as an advice. And to me, a non-negotiable, wherever possible in your pedagogy, especially MDP and LDP's level, I think coaching is a must. I spoke in the beginning about the repetition and retention. So what coaching does, it brings in emotional connection, and then it also brings in that repetition, which increases the ROIs of your learning investments. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much again for summarizing it so well, and for both of you for being so crisp and concise with the advice. Thank you so much for all your questions. It was such an insightful session. I know we weren't able to take many questions, but I'm sure you will get a chance to speak with them afterwards as well. As we conclude this panel discussion and move to an exciting new segment, I would like to all of you to stay here for a few more minutes. And I would like to invite you all for an unveiling of a research report by UNext and People Matters called Skillscape 2024, Navigating India's Talent Horizon. This report is packed with data and progressive industry insights on new L&D mandate and the future of India's skill landscape. I assure you, you don't want to miss this when creating experiential, learning-focused talent strategies for transformative insights. Now, I'd like to invite Satish for unveiling the report and say a few words about it and share highlights, a few highlights, insights with all of you.
Sure. So I'll take maybe 1 minute.
Can we just, do that, start with that.
So whatever I'll speak will not have marketing in it, so you can be very patiently listening it. So I think great work done by People Matters on this, along with us. Please, maybe you do it, please. Let Shruti do it. Thank you so much. Yeah. I'm not sure how many of have come across the name UNext, but I assume most of you would know Manipal. So UNext is part of Manipal, just to touch upon the reference. And what we have done in this is we do a lot of research work with ETHR, with People Matters, with different consulting firms as well. So why this one I found a little special, even in terms of effort that People Matters have put along with us. We have spoken with about 150 odd L&D leaders from 150 organizations. Roughly about 70% of them happens to be 5,000 to 10,000 or 10,000 plus organizations. And then about 26%, which is about 35, 40 odd members, 1 to 5,000 or less than 5,000, less than 1,000 is also covered. Then the diversity of industries, IT, manufacturing, pharma, GCC, healthcare, all of that has been covered. You'll find some great insights across 4 or 5 chapters which are there, right from some of the concepts we're talking about, what is the response of these 150 odd people. More interesting about the approach is, apart from these respondents, 150 odd virtual respondents and everything and conversations, 10 senior L&D industry evangelists have spent almost an hour, 90 minutes of interview conversation weighting some of those outcomes, including the L&D leaders from EY, PwC, Pfizer, maybe I'm missing a few names, Samsung, just to give you a few names. So those of you who love to read a soft copy, you can of course scan the QR code. And those of you would probably, I'm not sure how many of the hard copies we left since morning, but there are some too many. So very happy, if you visit UNext and you can collect a hard book over there. One interesting insight which I found, I've been part of different panel as an observer and listener since morning. I've heard some keynotes also. The word that I've heard the most is AI and Gen AI since morning. And there's one data point which talks about which are the top skills that the organizations are looking at. You'll be surprised to see there are only 2 out of 8, which is tech, which is digital transformation, and that includes AI as an element. The other 6 is innovation, collaboration, your cross-functional skills, emotional intelligence, all those skills. So that's very, very interesting, and accordingly you'll find a lot more interesting areas. So that's what it is, just over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Satish.
And maybe, I'm sorry if we're talking about engagement, so if I can take 30 seconds, and in interest of time, think of any role model whosoever is your role model. I'll leave this small exercise. I experienced it, I loved it. ABC, it could be an industrial leader, it could be a film star, your family, somebody. Write down all the qualities for which you find that person as your role model. Let's say you document 10 qualities. And then just circle whatever you lack or you don't have. And work on it. Thank you so much. Thank you for being a wonderful audience. Over to you.
A big round of applause, guys, for our expert speakers. And I hope you've got a chance to scan the QR code to access the report. It's definitely amazing. You will not just see industry insights, you will also see how your peers are doing and compare your organization's progress. So thank you again.